The dusty streets of Willits, California in the summer of 1878 erupted in laughter when Zelda Parker walked into the marshal's office and demanded to be sworn in as deputy. The mayor, a portly man named Hutchins, had just posted a notice seeking law enforcement after Marshal Dalton had been gunned down outside the saloon 3 days prior. Every able-bodied man in town had turned away from the job, too frightened of the gang that had claimed dominion over Willits since the railroad pushed through. But Zelda, with her father's Colt revolver strapped to her hip and determination blazing in her green eyes, refused to hear the word no. "This is a man's job, Miss Parker," Hutchins said, removing his spectacles and cleaning them with a handkerchief that had seen better days. "Your father was a fine lawman, God rest his soul, but he wouldn't want his daughter putting herself in harm's way." Zelda planted both hands on the desk, leaning forward until the mayor had nowhere to look but at her unwavering gaze. "My father taught me to shoot before I could read. I can track a man through rock and sand. I know every law in the California Penal Code because I copied them out by hand when I was 12 years old. And most importantly, I am not afraid of Buck Callahan and his gang of thugs." The mention of Buck Callahan's name made Hutchins pale. The outlaw had rolled into town with 15 men and had been systematically bleeding the businesses dry with protection money. Anyone who refused found their property burned or worse. Marshal Dalton had tried to stand up to them, and now he lay in the town cemetery. "It is not proper," Hutchins stammered. "What would people say? They would say that Willits finally has someone willing to protect them." Zelda straightened, her hand resting on the grip of her revolver. "Swear me in, or I will do the job without the badge. Either way, Buck Callahan's reign ends today." Behind her, the door opened, and a tall figure stepped into the office. Zelda turned to see a man she had never encountered before, though she knew every face in Willits. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway and dark hair that brushed his collar. His eyes, a striking blue that seemed out of place in the sun-beaten landscape, assessed her with an expression she could not quite read. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, dusty trail gear and worn boots, but something about the way he carried himself suggested more. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or perhaps further south. "I heard you were looking for someone to wear a badge." Hutchins seized on this interruption like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. Yes indeed. What is your name, son? Do you have any experience with law enforcement?" The stranger's eyes remained on Zelda for a moment longer before shifting to the mayor. "Name is Cade Irons. I have worked as a ranch hand, trail boss, and scout. I am good with a gun and better at staying alive." "Perfect," Hutchins said, rising from his chair with an enthusiasm that made his jowls shake. "You are exactly what we need. The pay is $40 a month plus room and board." "Hold on," Zelda interjected, stepping between the mayor and this Cade Irons. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, which irritated her. "I was here first. The job is mine." Cade looked down at her and something flickered across his features. Amusement? Respect? She could not tell. "I mean no disrespect, madam, but this is dangerous work. Buck Callahan is not going to care whether you are a woman when he comes for whoever wears that badge. Then he will discover that this woman does not miss when she shoots," Zelda said flatly. "And I will not be intimidated by a bully, regardless of how many men he has behind him." The cowboy studied her for a long moment, and Zelda refused to look away. She had faced down too many men who thought her gender made her weak to back down now. Her father had raised her to be strong, to stand for what was right, and she would honor his memory by bringing law back to Willits. "Tell you what," Cade finally said. Why don't we let the mayor here hire us both? You clearly know this town and its people. I know how men like Callahan think. Together, we might actually survive past sundown. Hutchins looked stricken. The town cannot afford to pay 2 deputies. We barely have enough in the coffers for one. Then pay her the full wage, Cade said, surprising both Zelda and the mayor. I will work for room and board until the situation is resolved. Once Callahan is gone, you can decide who you want to keep on permanent. Zelda narrowed her eyes at him. Why would you do that? Cade shrugged, but his expression was serious. Because you remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who would have walked into hell itself if she thought it was the right thing to do. And because I have a feeling you are going to go after Callahan whether you have a badge or not. I would rather be there to watch your back than read about your funeral in the newspaper. The pragmatism of his answer caught her off guard. She had expected condescension or mockery, not genuine concern wrapped in practical reasoning. Zelda turned back to Hutchins. Swear us both in. We will bring order back to Willits before the sun sets tonight. The mayor looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement but equally aware that he had no better options. Every other man in town had made himself scarce when the deputy position was posted. Very well, he said with obvious reluctance. He retrieved a worn Bible from his desk drawer and had them place their hands on it. You swear to uphold the laws of California and the United States, to protect the citizens of Willits, and to discharge your duties as deputy marshal faithfully and honestly. I do, they said in unison. Hutchins produced 2 tin badges from his desk, both dulled with age. He pinned one to Zelda's shirt, his hands shaking slightly, and then did the same for Cade. May God have mercy on your souls, he muttered. We will need ammunition, rifles, and information on Callahan's movements, Zelda said immediately, all business now that the badge was official. Where does he and his gang spend most of their time? The Silver Dollar Saloon, Hutchins said. They have taken it over as their headquarters. Pete Danvers, the owner, is too terrified to throw them out. They drink his whiskey, eat his food, and haven't paid a cent in 2 weeks. Zelda checked her revolver, ensuring all 6 chambers were loaded. Then that is where we are going. Cade caught her arm as she turned toward the door, his grip firm but not painful. Wait, we need a plan. Walking in there guns blazing will just get us killed. She pulled her arm free but did not head for the door. What do you suggest? Let me go in first, Cade said. I will assess the situation, see how many men he has with him, gauge their alertness. You come in 5 minutes later. If things go south, at least one of us might make it out to try again. Zelda hated the idea of staying behind, but she recognized the wisdom in his approach. Fine. But if shooting starts before I get there, I am coming in immediately. Fair enough. Cade adjusted his gun belt and gave her a look that was hard to interpret. Try not to get yourself killed, Deputy Parker. It would be a shame to lose you before I even learn why you are so determined to take on a gang of killers. He left before she could respond, his long strides carrying him out into the blazing afternoon sun. Zelda watched through the dusty window as he walked down the main street toward the Silver Dollar. Other townsfolk saw him coming and quickly moved out of his way, pressing themselves against storefronts or ducking into alleyways. Fear had taken root in Willits like a poisonous weed. She counted off the seconds in her head, watching the building 2 blocks down where the saloon's bat wing doors stood partially open. Cade disappeared inside. Zelda's heart hammered in her chest, though not from fear. This was what she had been preparing for her entire life, even if she had not fully realized it until her father died 3 months ago. Benjamin Parker had been a lawman for 20 years before a fever took him, and he had taught his only child everything he knew about justice, honor, and standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. The town had expected her to sell her father's small house and move back east to live with relatives she had never met. Instead, Zelda had stayed, taking in sewing and laundry to pay for food while she practiced her shooting every morning at dawn. She knew every street and alley in Willits, knew which merchants were honest and which would shortchange you if you did not count your money. She knew that old Mrs. Henderson had failing eyesight but was too proud to admit it, and that Tommy Chen, who ran the general store, had a sister in San Francisco who sent him books that he loaned out like a private library. This was her town, and she would not let Buck Callahan steal it. The 5 minutes crawled by like hours. Finally, Zelda pushed open the door of the marshal's office and stepped into the afternoon heat. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the dusty street into a shimmering haze. Her boots kicked up small clouds of dirt as she walked, hand hovering near her revolver. The weight of the badge on her chest felt both foreign and absolutely right. As she approached the silver dollar, she could hear raucous laughter spilling out into the street. Piano music played badly, the keys plinking in an off-tune melody. Zelda took a deep breath, said a silent prayer to her father's memory, and pushed through the bat wing doors. The saloon fell silent the instant she entered. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward her, ranging from shocked to amused to openly hostile. The interior was dim after the brightness outside, and it took a moment for her vision to adjust. When it did, she saw Cade standing at the bar with a glass of whiskey in his hand, looking for all the world like he belonged there. At a large table in the back sat a man who could only be Buck Callahan. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with straw-colored hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruel twist to his mouth. He wore expensive clothes, a black vest over a white shirt with pearl buttons, and 2 revolvers crossed at his hips. 5 men sat at the table with him, and Zelda spotted at least 6 more scattered around the saloon. All of them were armed. "Well, well," Callahan drawled, leaning back in his chair with a grin that did not reach his eyes. "What do we have here? Looks like Willits got itself a lady deputy. Boys, did you see this? They are so desperate they are putting badges on petticoats now." His men laughed, but it was forced, uncertain. They had not expected this any more than Callahan had. Zelda walked further into the room, her boots echoing on the wooden floor. She kept her expression neutral, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing fear or anger. "Buck Callahan," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You are hereby ordered to leave Willits with your men immediately. The protection racket ends today. Any business owner who has paid you money will receive restitution, and if you or any of your gang are seen in this town after sunset, you will be arrested." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the piano player had stopped, his hands frozen above the keys. Then Callahan threw back his head and laughed, a genuine sound of mirth that was somehow more chilling than his earlier mockery. "Arrested," he repeated, slapping the table. "You hear that, boys? This little girl is going to arrest us." He stood, his hand dropping to rest on one of his revolvers. "Sweetheart, I have killed men twice your size for saying less. What makes you think you can walk in here and make demands?" "This," Zelda said, tapping the badge on her chest. "And this." She drew her revolver in one smooth motion, faster than most of the men in the room could follow. She fired once, the bullet whipping past Callahan's ear so close that it must have felt like a hot wind, and shattered the whiskey bottle on the shelf behind him. Before anyone could react, she had the gun leveled at Callahan's chest. "The next one goes through your heart." Callahan had gone very still, his face no longer showing amusement. His men started to rise, hands reaching for weapons, but Cade's voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't. He had drawn his own gun and now covered the men at Callahan's table. Deputy Parker is not alone in this, and I can promise you that several of you will die before either of us goes down. Is that what you want? To die in this nowhere town for a man who would step over your corpses without a second thought? Who the hell are you? Callahan demanded, his eyes flicking between Zelda and Cade. Deputy Cade Irons, Cade said calmly. And right now, I am the only thing keeping my partner from putting a bullet in you. See, I am a reasonable man. I think we can resolve this peacefully. But Deputy Parker, she lost her father recently. A good man, a lawman who dedicated his life to protecting people. I think she would be just fine with painting the walls with your blood. Zelda said nothing, which somehow made the threat more believable. She kept her revolver trained on Callahan, her hand perfectly steady. Every man in the room could see that she meant business, that this was not a bluff or a woman in over her head. This was someone who had come prepared to die if necessary, but intended to take Callahan with her. You are making a mistake, Callahan said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. I have more men. They are not all here. Then you had better send for them, Zelda said, because you have until sunset to clear out, and that is less than 4 hours away. Every single member of your gang needs to be gone, or we start making arrests. Resist arrest, and we start making funerals. You cannot possibly believe you will survive this, Callahan said. Even if you kill me right now, my men will gun you down before you take another breath. Maybe, Zelda acknowledged, but you will still be dead. Are you willing to bet your life that your men will avenge you, or will they decide that without you around, they can split up your money and go their separate ways? Because from where I stand, you do not inspire much loyalty. You inspire fear, and fear evaporates the moment you are no longer a threat. She could see her words hitting home. Callahan's eyes darted to his men, and she saw the calculation there. He was wondering if she was right, if these outlaws would really risk their lives for him, or if they would simply let him die and then scatter. It was a question he had probably never had to ask himself before. This is not over, Callahan finally said. He raised his hands slowly, showing he was not going for his guns. But I am not fool enough to draw on someone who already has their weapon aimed at my chest. You got lucky today, Deputy. That luck will not hold. I am counting on skill, not luck, Zelda said. Now, you and your men are going to walk out of here slowly. You are going to collect the rest of your gang, and you are going to ride out of Willits. If I see any of you at sunset, I will assume you have chosen the hard way. Callahan gestured to his men, and they rose cautiously from their seats. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Every person present knew that one wrong move could turn this into a bloodbath. Cade kept his gun trained on the group as they moved toward the door, giving Zelda covering fire. You have made an enemy today, Callahan said as he reached the bat-wing doors. I want you to remember that when I come back for you. I will be waiting, Zelda said. Callahan left, his men following like a pack of wolves slinking away from a rival predator. The moment they were gone, the saloon erupted in excited chatter. Pete Danvers, the owner, came out from behind the bar where he had been hiding, his face flushed with emotion. Deputy Parker, he said, his voice breaking. I cannot believe what you just did. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen. Zelda holstered her revolver, her hand shaking slightly now that the immediate danger had passed. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving her feeling weak and slightly nauseous. It is not over yet. Callahan will regroup and come back. We need to prepare. Cade holstered his own weapon and walked over to her. Up close, she could see that his eyes held a respect that had not been there before. That was some shooting, he said quietly. Where did you learn to draw that fast, my father? Zelda said. He said that if I was going to carry a gun, I needed to be faster and more accurate than any man I might face. So I practiced every single day for 10 years. It shows. Cade glanced toward the doors where Callahan had disappeared, but he was right about one thing. They will be back and they will come ready for a fight. We need to even the odds. Zelda nodded, her mind already working through strategies. We need to deputize more men, people we can trust, and we need to fortify defensible positions around town. You are thinking like a lawman, Cade observed. Your father taught you well. The compliment warmed her more than she wanted to admit. We should split up, cover more ground. You take the north end of town, I will take the south. Spread the word that anyone who wants to protect their homes and businesses should meet at the marshal's office in 1 hour. Agreed. Cade hesitated, then added, You did good in there, Zelda. A lot of men would have backed down when faced with those odds. It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her pulse quicken. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the task at hand. Let us hope we do just as well when they come back. She left the saloon, stepping out into the afternoon sun that had shifted lower in the sky. Word of what had happened was already spreading through Willits like wildfire. People stopped on the street to stare at her, some with admiration, others with fear. Zelda understood both reactions. She had just kicked a hornet's nest, and everyone in town would feel the consequences. As she walked south, knocking on doors and gathering support, Zelda thought about Cade Irons. There was something about him that did not quite add up. He had appeared at exactly the right moment, had skills that suggested more than just ranch work, and had been willing to take less pay just to help her. What was his real story, and why did she find herself caring about the answer? She pushed those thoughts aside as Tommy Chen agreed to be deputized, followed by Jacob Miller, the blacksmith, and 3 ranch hands who had been in town for supplies. By the time Zelda made her way back to the marshal's office, she had recruited 8 men willing to stand against Callahan's gang. It was not enough, but it was better than just her and Cade. The office was crowded when she arrived. Cade had brought in 6 men from the north end of town, including Frank Hayes, who ran the livery stable and was known as one of the best shots in the county. Hutchins was there too, looking pale but determined. The town council has authorized emergency funds, the mayor said. We can offer $20 to every man who helps defend Willits today. It is not much, but it is what we have. It is not about the money, Frank said. He was in his 50s, with gray streaking his beard and scars on his hands from years of working with horses. It is about time someone stood up to those bastards. Pardon my language, Miss Parker. I have heard worse, Zelda assured him. She moved to the large map of Willits that hung on the wall, studying the layout of the town. Callahan will likely come from the east. That is where he has been camped, about 2 miles outside of town. If we position men on the rooftops here, and here, we can catch them in a crossfire. Cade stepped up beside her, his shoulder nearly touching hers. We should also barricade the main street, force them to dismount and come at us on foot. Horses make good targets, and most outlaws do not like to fight without an easy means of escape. Good thinking. Zelda marked positions on the map with a piece of charcoal. Tommy, you and your brother take the roof of the general store. Jacob, Frank, you are on the hotel. You will have the best vantage point from there. She continued assigning positions, placing their defenders strategically around the town center. Cade added his own suggestions, and she found that they worked together with an ease that surprised her. He did not try to override her authority or assume command because of his gender. Instead, he treated her as an equal partner, building on her ideas and offering his own. As the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, Zelda realized with a start that sunset was less than 2 hours away. The townspeople worked quickly to set up barricades, using wagons, barrels, and anything else that could stop a bullet. Women and children were sent to the church on the far edge of town, the most defensible building if things went badly. Zelda was checking the ammunition supply when Cade found her in the back room of the marshal's office. "I wanted to ask you something," he said, closing the door behind him to give them privacy. "Make it quick," she said, counting bullets. "We need to be in position soon." "Why did you really want this badge?" Cade leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "And do not tell me it is just about your father. There is something more personal driving you." Zelda paused, a box of cartridges in her hands. She had not talked about that day with anyone, had locked it away deep inside where it could not hurt her. But something about Cade's direct gaze and genuine curiosity made her want to tell him. "Marshal Dalton," she said quietly. "When he was killed, I saw it happen. I was walking home from Mrs. Henderson's house where I had been doing some mending. I saw Callahan and his men surround the marshal in the street. Dalton went for his gun, but there were too many of them. They shot him down like a dog, then laughed about it, and I stood there, frozen, unable to do anything to help him." Her voice had gone rough with emotion, and she had to stop to collect herself. Cade waited patiently, not pushing her. "I realized in that moment that fear is a poison," Zelda continued. "It had already taken my father from me through illness. I was not going to let it take my home too. Callahan and men like him thrive because good people are too afraid to stand against them. Someone had to be willing to say enough. Someone had to prove that they are not invincible. And it had to be you," Cade said softly. "It had to be someone." Zelda met his eyes. "The men of this town are not cowards, but they have families to protect. They were afraid that if they stood up to Callahan, he would burn their homes or hurt their children. I have no husband, no children. Just myself, and the memory of a father who taught me that doing right matters more than being safe." Cade was quiet for a long moment. "Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man." "He was." Zelda set down the ammunition and faced him fully. "Now you tell me something. Why did you really come to Willits? And do not tell me it was coincidence that you showed up right when we needed someone. You are not just a ranch hand, Cade Irons. I can see it in the way you move, the way you assess situations. So who are you really?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him weighing whether to tell her the truth. Finally, he sighed. "I was a Texas Ranger for 5 years. I left the Rangers 8 months ago after my wife was killed by outlaws I was tracking." The pain in his voice was raw and real. Zelda felt her chest tighten with sympathy. "I am so sorry." "Her name was Elizabeth," Cade continued, staring at something beyond the walls of the room. "She was beautiful and fierce and believed I could make a difference. I was away chasing down a gang of bank robbers when another group came through our town. She tried to protect our neighbors, grabbed my spare rifle and faced them down. They killed her for it." He finally looked back at Zelda. "When I heard about what was happening here, about a woman willing to stand up to a gang of outlaws, I had to come. I could not save Elizabeth, but maybe I could help you." Zelda moved closer to him, driven by an impulse she did not fully understand. "Cade, what happened to your wife is not your fault. You could not have known." "I know that in my head," he said, "but my heart is another matter. I see her every time I close my eyes. I hear her voice telling me to do the right thing to protect people who cannot protect themselves." He looked down at Zelda, and something shifted in his expression. "When I saw you standing up to the mayor demanding to wear that badge, you reminded me so much of her. That same fire, that same refusal to back down. I could not let you face this alone." "I am glad you came," Zelda said honestly. "I meant what I said before. I would have done this with or without help, but I am grateful I do not have to." Their eyes held, and Zelda felt something pass between them. Recognition, perhaps, of two people who understood loss and determination in equal measure. She was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the height difference that made her tilt her head back to look at him, of the way his presence seemed to fill the small room. The moment was broken by Frank Hayes calling from outside. "Deputies, we have riders coming from the east." Zelda and Cade moved as one, grabbing rifles and extra ammunition as they rushed outside. The sun was touching the horizon now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In the distance, she could see a cloud of dust rising from the road. Callahan was coming, and he had brought an army. "Positions," Zelda called out. The men they had deputized scrambled to their assigned locations. She could feel the fear in the air, but also determination. The people of Willits were done being victims. Zelda and Cade took up position behind a barricade made from 2 overturned wagons. They had a clear view down the main street and were close enough to support the men on the rooftops if needed. Zelda checked her revolvers, both of them now, the second one borrowed from the marshal's office. She had extra bullets in her pockets and a Winchester rifle propped against the wagon. "How many do you count?" she asked Cade, who was peering through a gap in the barricade. 20, maybe 25, he said grimly. He brought everyone. Zelda felt her stomach clench but kept her voice steady. "Then we make every shot count." The riders came closer, and she could now make out individual faces. Callahan was in the lead, his expression twisted with rage. He had not expected resistance, had thought that his reputation and numbers would be enough to cow the town permanently. Being challenged by a woman had wounded his pride, and he was here to restore it through blood. The gang stopped about 50 yards from the barricade, their horses stamping and snorting. Callahan nudged his mount forward a few more paces. "Last chance," he called out. "Send out that woman and her friend, and the rest of you can live. Otherwise, we burn this whole town to the ground." Zelda stood up, making herself visible. "Last chance for you too, Callahan. Turn around now and you might live to see tomorrow." His answer was to draw his revolver and fire. The bullet struck the wagon near her head, and then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from both sides, the sound deafening in the narrow street. Zelda dropped back behind cover and brought up her rifle, sighting carefully before firing. One of Callahan's men toppled from his saddle. Cade was firing methodically beside her, each shot calculated and precise. 2 more outlaws went down. From the rooftops, Frank and the others were pouring down fire, their elevated positions giving them a significant advantage. Horses screamed and reared, throwing their riders. Men scrambled for cover, finding themselves trapped in the killing field that the main street had become. Callahan was screaming orders, trying to rally his men, but the fight was already turning against him. His gang had expected an easy target, a frightened town that would fold at the first sign of violence. Instead, they had run into prepared defenders who knew the terrain and were fighting for their homes. A bullet whined past Zelda's ear, close enough that she felt the heat of its passage. She shifted position, popping up in a different spot and firing twice in quick succession. Another outlaw fell. She could feel the rhythm of the fight now, the ebb and flow of combat that her father had described to her. Fear was still there, thrumming under everything, but it was controlled, channeled into focus. "Reloading," Cade called out, and Zelda immediately increased her rate of fire to cover him. The teamwork was instinctive, each of them supporting the other without needing to discuss it. They moved together like partners who had been working side by side for years rather than hours. The battle lasted perhaps 15 minutes, though it felt like hours. When the smoke finally began to clear, 8 of Callahan's men lay dead or wounded in the street. The rest had broken and run, galloping back the way they had come with Callahan in the lead. The great outlaw had discovered that he did not have the stomach for a real fight when the odds were not overwhelming in his favor. A ragged cheer went up from the defenders. Zelda stood slowly, her ears ringing from the gunfire. She looked around, checking for casualties on their side. Jacob Miller had taken a bullet through the shoulder but would live. One of the ranch hands had been grazed across the ribs. Miraculously, no one on their side had been killed. "We did it," she said, hardly believing the words. "We actually did it." Cade stood beside her, his face smudged with powder smoke. "You did it," he corrected. "This was your plan, your courage. I just helped." The townspeople were emerging from their hiding places now, flooding into the street with expressions of wonder and relief. Pete Danvers was crying openly, and Tommy Chen was shaking Frank Hayes's hand with such enthusiasm that the older man laughed. Mayor Hutchins appeared, looking dazed but pleased. "Deputy Parker," he said formally. "Deputy Irons, on behalf of the town of Willits, I thank you. You have given us back our freedom." Zelda felt the weight of exhaustion settling over her now that the danger had passed. She had proven that a woman could wear a badge, could stand against evil and win. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, marking sunset. She had done exactly what she had set out to do before the day ended. But as she looked at Cade, saw the pride and something warmer in his eyes, she realized that she had gained more than just vindication. She had found someone who understood her, who had stood beside her when it mattered most. Someone who had seen her not as a woman trying to do a man's job, but as a partner worthy of respect. "We should check on the wounded," she said, needing to focus on something practical before the emotions overwhelmed her. "I will handle that," Cade said gently. "You should rest. You have done enough for one day." "So have you," she pointed out. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "Then we will both rest, but first, let us make sure everyone is taken care of." They worked together as the evening darkened into night, tending to the wounded and organizing men to clear the bodies from the street. It was grim work, but necessary. By the time the last of the outlaws' corpses had been hauled to the undertaker, Zelda was swaying on her feet. "Come on," Cade said, taking her arm. "You are going to collapse if you do not eat and sleep soon." "I should make a report," Zelda protested weakly. "Document everything that happened." "Tomorrow," Cade said firmly. "Tonight you need to take care of yourself." He walked her to her small house at the edge of town, the one her father had built with his own hands. Zelda fumbled with the key, her fingers clumsy with exhaustion. Cade gently took it from her and unlocked the door. "Thank you," she said as he handed the key back, "for everything today. I could not have done this without you." "Yes, you could have," Cade said, "but I am glad you did not have to." He hesitated, then added, "Zelda, I know this is not the time and maybe I have no right, but I need you to know something. Today, watching you stand up to Callahan, seeing your courage and determination, it reminded me that there is still good in this world worth fighting for. You reminded me of that." Zelda felt her cheeks flush, and not from the exertion of the day. "Cade, You do not have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know. Get some rest, Deputy Parker. We have a town to protect." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Zelda standing in her doorway with her heart racing. She went inside, leaning against the closed door and trying to process everything that had happened. In one day, she had fulfilled her vow to bring law back to Willits, had faced down killers, and had found herself drawn to a man who had appeared like Providence at her moment of greatest need. The house felt empty without her father's presence. She could still see him sitting in his chair by the fireplace, reading or cleaning his guns. Zelda moved through the familiar rooms, lighting lamps against the darkness. She should eat, she knew, but she was too tired to prepare anything. Instead, she poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table where she had spent so many evenings with her father. "I did it, Papa," she whispered to the empty room. "I wore the badge. I protected the town. I hope you would be proud." The words hung in the silence, and Zelda felt tears finally come, the release of tension and grief and triumph all mixed together. She had held herself together all day, had shown no weakness in front of the men who doubted her or the outlaws who threatened her. But here, alone in her father's house, she could finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She cried until there were no more tears, then washed her face and forced herself to eat some bread and cheese. By the time she fell into bed, still wearing most of her clothes, the moon was high in the sky. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of blue eyes and a voice that made her feel less alone. Morning came too early, announced by roosters and the sounds of the town waking up. Zelda groaned and pulled the pillow over her head, every muscle in her body aching. Eventually, duty won out over comfort, and she dragged herself out of bed. She washed and changed into clean clothes, pinning the badge to her shirt and strapping on her gun belt. The marshal's office was already occupied when she arrived. Cade was there, looking only slightly less exhausted than she felt, along with Mayor Hutchins and Frank Hayes. "Good morning, Deputy Parker," Hutchins said, beaming at her. "I trust you slept well." "Well enough," Zelda said, accepting the cup of coffee that Cade poured for her. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and she felt that same spark of connection from the night before. "What is the situation?" "2 of Callahan's wounded men died in the night," Frank reported. "The 3rd is stable and under guard at Doc Morrison's. He is singing like a canary, told us that Callahan and the survivors headed south toward Sacramento. Says they were talking about laying low for a while." "Good," Zelda said, though she knew better than to assume the threat was over completely. "We should wire the marshal in Sacramento, let him know they are headed his way." "Already done," Cade said. "I also sent word to the county sheriff about what happened here. They will want an official report, but I gave them the basics." Zelda sipped her coffee, grateful for both the warmth and his efficiency. "What about the town? How are people feeling?" Hutchins practically glowed. "Deputy Parker, you are a hero. Everyone is talking about how you faced down Buck Callahan." "The general store has already had 3 customers this morning asking when they could buy you a drink." "I was just doing the job," Zelda said, uncomfortable with the attention. "There are a lot of people who deserve credit for yesterday. Every man who stood with us took the same risks." "But you were the one who started it," Frank said. "You were the one who walked into that office and demanded the badge when every man in town was too scared. That took real courage, Miss Parker." "Zelda," she corrected. "If we are going to be working together, you should call me Zelda." Frank grinned. "Zelda it is. And you should know the town council met early this morning. They want to offer you the position of marshal permanently. $45 a month, use of the office, and a place to stay if you need it." Zelda felt her breath catch. Marshal. Her father had been a deputy for 15 of his 20 years in law enforcement, never quite making it to marshal. And here she was being offered the position after just 1 day. "What about Deputy Irons?" she asked, looking at Cade. "He deserves the position as much as I do." "We would like to offer him the position of deputy marshal," Hutchins said. $50 a month. Together, you 2 would be responsible for law enforcement in Willits and the surrounding area." Cade was looking at her, not the mayor, and Zelda saw the question in his eyes. He was asking if she wanted him to stay, if she wanted to continue the partnership they had begun. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to thank him for his help and send him on his way. She had proven her point, could handle the job alone now that Callahan was gone. But as she looked at him, Zelda realized she did not want to do this alone. More than that, she did not want Cade to leave. In one day, he had become important to her in a way that went beyond professional respect. He made her feel seen and valued. He challenged her to be better while also supporting her unconditionally. And there was something else, something she was not quite ready to name, that made her pulse quicken whenever he was near. "I accept the position of marshal," Zelda said, "on the condition that Deputy Irons accepts his position as well." Cade smiled, that transformation of his features that she was coming to appreciate. "Then I accept. Looks like Willits is stuck with both of us." Hutchins produced the official documentation, and they signed the papers that made their positions permanent. As Zelda signed her name, she felt her father's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. This was what he had trained her for, prepared her for, even if he had not fully realized it himself. The next few weeks settled into a routine that felt both new and comfortable. Zelda and Cade worked together to establish proper law enforcement in Willits, breaking up fights at the saloons, mediating disputes between neighbors, and tracking down a horse thief who had been operating in the area. They made a good team, their skills complementing each other perfectly. Where Zelda knew the people and history of the town, Cade brought experience with criminal behavior and tracking. Where he sometimes moved too quickly, ready to confront problems head-on, she provided strategic thinking and patience. But it was more than just professional partnership. As the days passed, Zelda found herself looking forward to their morning meetings over coffee, to the easy conversations they shared during long patrols around town. Cade told her stories of his time as a Texas Ranger, of vast deserts and dangerous manhunts. She told him about growing up in Willits, about her mother who had died when Zelda was young, and her father's patient instruction in everything from shooting to reading law books. They learned each other's habits and preferences. Zelda discovered that Cade liked his coffee strong enough to strip paint and had a weakness for the apple pie at the bakery. He learned that she was fiercest first thing in the morning and grew quiet and contemplative in the evenings. They developed a shorthand of looks and gestures, could communicate entire sentences with just a raised eyebrow or a slight tilt of the head. The town noticed, of course. In a place as small as Willits, gossip spread faster than wildfire. Zelda heard the whispers, saw the knowing looks that passed between shopkeepers and townspeople. It made her uncomfortable, but she also found she did not entirely mind. Let them speculate. She and Cade were doing good work, making Willits safer than it had been in years. About a month after the confrontation with Callahan, they received word that the outlaw gang had been captured in Sacramento after trying to rob a bank. Callahan himself was dead, shot during the attempted robbery. His surviving men were awaiting trial. The news should have brought relief, but instead Zelda felt strangely melancholy. "It is really over," she said to Cade as they sat on the porch of the marshal's office, watching the sun set over the town. "Callahan is gone, his gang is broken up. We did what we set out to do." "We did," Cade agreed. He was whittling a piece of wood, his hands steady and sure. "So why do you sound sad about it?" Zelda struggled to put her feelings into words. "I suppose I thought there would be more to it, that bringing justice would feel more satisfying than this." "Justice is not about satisfaction," Cade said quietly. "It is about necessity. We stopped Callahan because he needed to be stopped, because people were suffering under his control. The fact that it does not feel triumphant does not make it any less important." "Is that what you learned as a ranger?" Zelda asked. "That and the fact that evil is often smaller than we imagine," Cade said. "Callahan was just a bully with guns and men willing to follow him. Strip away the fear he inspired, and he was nothing special. Just another outlaw who thought violence made him powerful. Zelda leaned back against the wall, feeling the day's warmth radiating from the wood. "Do you miss it, being a ranger?" Cade was quiet for a long moment, his knife pausing in its work. "I miss the purpose it gave me," he finally said. "The feeling of doing something that mattered, but I do not miss the violence or the constant travel, and—" He hesitated, then turned to look at her. "I do not miss being alone. Elizabeth was gone, my family is scattered, and I realized I was just running from one town to the next without ever really being anywhere." "And now?" Zelda asked, her voice soft. "Now I am here," Cade said simply. "In Willits, with a job I am good at and a partner I respect more than just about anyone I have ever known." His blue eyes held hers. "I am not running anymore, Zelda. I am staying because I want to, because this feels like where I am supposed to be." Her heart was beating too fast, and Zelda knew they were approaching dangerous territory. She should say something neutral, should steer the conversation back to safer topics. Instead, she heard herself say, "I am glad you are staying. I have gotten used to having you around." Cade smiled. "Is that your way of saying you would miss me if I left?" "Maybe," Zelda admitted. Then, feeling brave, she added, "Yes, I would miss you." The air between them felt charged, full of possibility and words unspoken. Cade set down his whittling and turned to face her fully. "Zelda, I need to tell you something." Before he could continue, Tommy Chen came running up the street, his face flushed with exertion. "Marshal Parker, Deputy Irons, there is trouble at the Henderson place." They were on their feet instantly, all personal matters forgotten in the face of duty. "What kind of trouble?" Zelda demanded. "Some drifters showed up, claiming Mrs. Henderson owes them money for work they did on her property," Tommy said between gasps for air. "They are saying they will take her livestock if she does not pay, but she says she never hired them." Zelda and Cade exchanged a glance. "Sounds like a con," Cade said, "probably targeting her because she is an older woman living alone." "Not anymore," Zelda said grimly. She grabbed her rifle and checked that her revolvers were loaded. "Let us go remind these gentlemen that Willits looks after its own." They took horses this time, riding hard to the Henderson property at the edge of town. The small farm was visible from the road, and Zelda could see two men standing in the yard while Mrs. Henderson cowered on her porch. Anger flared hot and bright in her chest. The elderly widow had been kind to Zelda after her father died, bringing food and company when the grief was fresh. No one was going to frighten her. Zelda and Cade dismounted at the gate, their badges clearly visible. The two drifters were rough-looking characters, unshaven and dusty from the road. They sized up the approaching lawmen with expressions that suggested they had done this before and thought they could talk their way out of trouble. "Evening, officers," one of them said with a false smile. "Just here to collect on a debt. No need for concern." "Mrs. Henderson says she never hired you," Zelda said flatly. "That makes this attempted theft, not debt collection." The smile vanished from the drifter's face. "Now hold on, we have every right to be here." "The old woman agreed to pay us for fixing her fence." "I did no such thing," Mrs. Henderson called from the porch. "I never saw these men before today." "See, there is the problem," Cade said, his hand resting on his revolver. "The lady says you are lying, and we believe her. So you have two choices. You can leave now peacefully, or we can arrest you for attempted theft and harassment. Your choice." The second drifter, who had been silent until now, spat in the dust. "You are going to believe some confused old woman over honest working men. That does not seem fair." "Life is not fair," Zelda said. "But the law is clear. You are trespassing on private property and threatening a citizen of Willits. Leave now or face the consequences." The first drifter looked between them, and Zelda saw him calculating the odds. 2 against 2, but the lawman had the advantage of preparation and authority. And she could see in his eyes the moment he recognized her, recognized the woman who had faced down Buck Callahan and won. "Fine," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "We will go. But you are making a mistake, choosing her word over ours." "I will live with it," Zelda said. She kept her hand near her gun as the two men mounted their horses and rode away, heading south down the road. Only when they were out of sight did she relax slightly and turn to Mrs. Henderson. "Are you all right, madam?" The elderly woman came down from her porch, her eyes wet with tears. "Oh, Zelda, thank you. I was so frightened. They said such terrible things, threatened to burn my barn if I did not give them money." "They are gone now," Zelda said gently, taking the woman's hands. "And if they come back, you send for us immediately. No one is going to hurt you. Your father would be so proud," Mrs. Henderson said, squeezing Zelda's hands. "You have become everything he hoped you would be." The words hit Zelda harder than she expected, and she had to blink back sudden tears. "Thank you," she managed. Cade checked the property, making sure the drifters had not done any damage, while Zelda stayed with Mrs. Henderson and made sure she was truly all right. By the time they rode back to town, the sun had fully set and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "You are good at that," Cade said as they rode side by side. "At what?" Zelda asked, "making people feel safe. It is more than just the badge or the gun. You genuinely care about the people in this town. They can feel that." Zelda considered his words. "My father always said that being a lawman was about service, not power. You wear the badge to help people, not to control them. I guess I internalized that." "It is a good philosophy," Cade said. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Earlier, before Tommy interrupted us, I was trying to tell you something." Zelda's heart began to race again. "I remember." "Zelda, Cade trailed off, seeming to struggle with the words. "When I came to Willits, I was not looking for anything except a distraction, a way to stop thinking about Elizabeth and the life I lost. I thought I would help with the Callahan situation and then move on, same as I have been doing for months." "What changed?" Zelda asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "You," Cade said simply. "You changed everything. Somewhere between that first day in the marshal's office and now, I stopped running. I started looking forward to tomorrow instead of dreading it. And I realized that what I was feeling was not just respect or partnership. It is something more." They had reached the edge of town, but instead of continuing to the stable, Cade pulled his horse to a stop in a small grove of trees that offered privacy. Zelda stopped beside him, her pulse thundering in her ears. Cade dismounted and came to stand beside her horse, looking up at her. "I know this is complicated," he said. "I know I have baggage, that I am still grieving Elizabeth even though she has been gone for months. And I know you are focused on your job, on proving yourself to this town. But I need you to know that I care about you, Zelda, more than I thought I could care about anyone again." Zelda dismounted, needing to be on the same level as him for this conversation. They stood close in the darkness, close enough that she could see the earnest intensity in his eyes. "Cade, She took a breath, steadying herself. "I care about you too. I have been trying not to, trying to stay focused on the job, but it is impossible. You are the first person I think about in the morning and the last one before I fall asleep. When we are apart, I am counting the minutes until I see you again. And when we are together, everything feels right in a way that nothing has since my father died." "Zelda," Cade breathed her name like a prayer. He reached up, cupping her face gently with one hand. "Can I kiss you?" In answer, Zelda closed the distance between them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss started gentle, almost tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then Cade's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Zelda melted into him. The kiss deepened, becoming a conversation without words, an acknowledgement of everything they had been dancing around for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zelda rested her forehead against Cade's chest. "I did not plan for this," she admitted. "When I took the badge, romance was the last thing on my mind." "Life rarely goes according to plan," Cade said, his voice rumbling in his chest where her head rested. "But sometimes the unexpected turns out to be exactly what we need." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the darkness, before finally mounting their horses and continuing into town. They did not speak much on the ride, but their hands touched whenever their mounts came close, small contacts that felt significant. At Zelda's house, Cade helped her dismount, his hands lingering on her waist. "I should say good night," he said, though he made no move to leave. "You should," Zelda agreed, equally reluctant to end the evening. "Tomorrow," Cade said, "would you have dinner with me?" "Not as partners or deputies, but as us." "I would like that," Zelda said softly. "I would like that very much." Cade kissed her again, sweet and brief, before forcing himself to step back. "Good night, Zelda Parker. Sleep well." "Good night, Cade Irons." She watched him ride away, then went inside with her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. The house no longer felt so empty. She had purpose. She had work that mattered. And now she had someone who saw her not as a woman trying to do a man's job or a deputy who happened to be female, but simply as Zelda. Someone worth caring about, worth staying for. The next day dragged by with agonizing slowness. Zelda tried to focus on her duties, checking in with various businesses and reviewing reports that needed to be sent to the county, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. She changed clothes 3 times before finally settling on a simple blue dress that had been her mother's. It was impractical for law enforcement work, but tonight she wanted to feel feminine and pretty. Cade arrived at her door precisely at 7, looking nervous and handsome in clean clothes with his hair combed back. He had shaved, and Zelda could smell the faint scent of soap and leather. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers that he must have picked himself. "You look beautiful," he said, handing her the flowers. "You look quite handsome yourself," Zelda replied, inviting him inside while she found a jar to put the flowers in. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she felt like a girl at her first dance rather than a marshal who had faced down outlaws. They walked to the restaurant together, the small establishment run by a Chinese family that served the best food in Willits. Other diners looked up as they entered, and Zelda saw surprise on many faces. The marshal and her deputy, clearly on a personal rather than professional outing. By morning, the whole town would know. "Let them talk," Cade said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. He pulled out a chair for her at a corner table that offered some privacy. "I am not ashamed of wanting to spend time with you." "Neither am I," Zelda said, meaning it. She had spent her whole life worrying about what people thought, about proving herself worthy. But tonight, with Cade across from her and his eyes warm with affection, she found she did not care what the gossip said. They ordered food and talked about everything and nothing. Cade told her about growing up in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers who all went into ranching or law enforcement. She told him about learning to ride before she could walk, about her mother's quiet strength and her father's endless patience. They laughed over shared experiences and discovered surprising similarities in their views. "When I was a ranger," Cade said over dessert, "I thought that was going to be my whole life. I would work until I was too old or too slow, and then I would retire somewhere quiet and live out my days alone. I never imagined finding someone who understood the job, who shared the same values and dedication. My father used to tell me that the right person would see past the badge to the woman underneath, Zelda said. I always thought he was being optimistic. Most men in Willits saw the badge and decided I was trying to be something I was not. They could not accept that a woman might actually be good at law enforcement. Their loss, Cade said firmly. You are the best partner I have ever had, and I worked with some damn fine rangers. You are smart, brave, quick-thinking, and you care deeply about justice. The fact that you also happen to be beautiful is just a bonus. Zelda felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment. Cade, I mean it, he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I know we have not known each other long, but I feel like I have been waiting my whole life to meet you. Does that sound foolish? If it is foolish, then we are both fools, Zelda said, squeezing his hand. Because I feel the same way. They walked home slowly, taking the long route through town and talking quietly. The night was warm, filled with the sounds of crickets and distant music from the saloon. When they reached Zelda's door, Cade pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. I should go, he said reluctantly, but I do not want to. Then stay, Zelda said, surprising herself. I mean just to talk. I am not ready for anything more, but I would like to spend more time with you, Cade smiled. I would like that too. They sat on her porch, talking late into the night. Cade told her more about Elizabeth, about the guilt he carried and the slow process of learning to live with loss. Zelda talked about her father's death, the loneliness that had followed, and her determination to make something meaningful of her life. They were both people marked by grief, but they were also learning to find joy again. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. They were careful to maintain professionalism during work hours, but everyone in Willits knew that their marshal and deputy were courting. Some people disapproved, thinking it improper or a distraction from their duties. But most of the town watched with approval as two lonely people found happiness together. They faced challenges, both professional and personal. A gang of cattle rustlers required a week-long pursuit into the mountains. A dispute between two prominent families nearly turned violent before Zelda and Cade mediated a solution. There were days when they argued about tactics or approach, when the stress of the job strained their relationship. But they always came back together, learning to communicate better, to trust each other more completely. One evening in late autumn, nearly 6 months after that first day when Zelda had demanded a badge, Cade asked her to take a ride with him. They rode out to a spot overlooking Willits, where the whole valley spread out below them in the golden light of sunset. The town looked peaceful, prosperous, a far cry from the frightened place it had been under Callahan's control. I wanted to show you something, Cade said, dismounting and helping Zelda down. He led her to a spot where someone had clearly been working, clearing brush and leveling ground. I bought this land last month, 5 acres with a good view and access to the creek. Zelda looked around, seeing the potential. It is beautiful. What do you plan to do with it? Cade took a deep breath, and she realized he was nervous. I want to build a house here. A real home, not just a room above the office or a boarding house, somewhere permanent. That sounds wonderful, Zelda said, wondering why he looked so anxious. I want you to help me plan it, Cade continued. I want to know what you think about where the kitchen should go, how many bedrooms we should include, whether the porch should face east or west. He took her hands, his blue eyes intense. Zelda, I want to build a life with you. I want to marry you if you will have me. Zelda felt tears spring to her eyes. She had known she loved him, had known for weeks if she was honest with herself, but hearing him say the words made it real in a way that took her breath away. I know it is fast, Cade said, misinterpreting her silence. I know we have only known each other 6 months, and if you need more time, I understand. But I love you, Zelda Parker. I love your courage and your compassion, your stubborn determination and your kind heart. I love the way you stand up for what is right, the way you care for this town. I love everything about you, and I do not want to waste another day not being completely honest about how I feel." "Yes," Zelda said, the word coming out choked with emotion. "Yes, Cade, I will marry you. I love you too, more than I knew it was possible to love someone. You make me want to be better, do better. You see me as I truly am and love me anyway. Yes, 1,000 times yes." Cade whooped with joy, picking her up and spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. He set her down gently and kissed her, long and deep and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, the sun had set and stars were beginning to appear. "I do not have a ring yet," Cade said. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you said yes before I spent money I might not have needed to spend." "I do not need a ring," Zelda said. "I need you. Everything else is just details." But Cade bought her a ring anyway, a simple gold band with a small diamond that he presented to her 3 days later. She wore it proudly, the first time she had worn jewelry that was not purely practical. They set the wedding date for early December, wanting to be married before the year ended. The town embraced the news with enthusiasm. Zelda had proven herself a capable marshal, and Cade was well liked and respected. Their wedding was going to be a celebration not just of their love, but of everything Willits had overcome in the past months. From fear and oppression to freedom and hope, all symbolized by a woman who had refused to take no for an answer and the man who had stood beside her. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by in a blur of preparations. Mrs. Henderson insisted on making Zelda's dress, a beautiful creation of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. The town council voted to give them 3 days off for a honeymoon, unprecedented for law enforcement, but a sign of how much the town valued them. Cade hired a carpenter to begin work on their house, wanting to at least have the frame up before winter set in. They were in the marshal's office reviewing plans for increased patrols during the winter months when a stranger walked in. He was tall and lean, with a marshal's badge pinned to his vest and hard eyes that had seen too much violence. "I am looking for Cade Irons," he said without preamble. Cade looked up from the map they had been studying, his expression wary. "I am Cade Irons. What can I do for you?" "Marshal James Reeves, Sacramento office," the man said. "I need to talk to you about your time as a Texas Ranger." Zelda felt a chill run down her spine. Something in the marshal's tone suggested this was not a friendly visit. Cade must have sensed it too, because his whole demeanor changed, becoming guarded. "What about it?" Cade asked carefully. "There has been a development in the case involving your wife's death," Reeves said. "We have captured 2 of the men responsible. They are willing to testify against the rest of the gang in exchange for lighter sentences, but they want to talk to you first. They say they have information about who ordered the attack." Cade went very still. "Ordered?" "I was told it was a random act, outlaws passing through." "That is what everyone thought," Reeves said. "But according to these men, your wife was killed deliberately to get at you. Someone wanted revenge for arrests you made as a ranger." Zelda moved to stand beside Cade, placing a hand on his arm. She could feel the tension in his muscles, the barely contained emotion. "When do they want to meet?" she asked, her voice steady even though inside she was reeling. "As soon as possible," Reeves said. "They are in Sacramento awaiting trial. I can escort you both there if you want to hear what they have to say." "Both," Cade said sharply. "Why would Zelda need to come?" "Because if there is someone out there targeting you for revenge, anyone close to you could be in danger," Reeves said bluntly. "If you are engaged to Marshal Parker, she has a right to know what threats you might be facing." Zelda felt ice form in her stomach. She had known that loving Cade meant accepting his past, but she had not truly considered that his past might reach into their future with deadly intent. "We will come," Cade said. "Give us a day to arrange coverage for the town, and we will ride out with you." After Reeves left to find lodging for the night, Cade turned to Zelda. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I never imagined this would come back. I thought Elizabeth's death was random, a tragedy but not a targeted act. If I had known there was someone hunting me, I never would have stayed in Willits. I certainly would not have gotten involved with you." "Do not you dare," Zelda said fiercely. "Do not you dare regret us. We will face this together, same as we face everything else. Zelda, you do not understand. If someone killed Elizabeth to hurt me, they might come after you next. I cannot lose you. I cannot go through that again." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "You are not going to lose me. We are going to Sacramento, we are going to hear what those men have to say, and then we are going to deal with it. Together. I did not become a marshal because I wanted safety, Cade. I became a marshal because I believe in standing up to threats, in protecting people. That includes protecting you." "I love you," Cade said, his voice rough with emotion. "God, I love you so much." "I love you too," Zelda said. "Now let us figure out who we can trust to watch over Willits while we are gone." They settled on Frank Hayes as temporary marshal, with Tommy Chen and Jacob Miller as his deputies. All three men were reliable and capable, more than able to handle the town's needs for a few days. Frank was honored by the responsibility and promised to keep everything running smoothly. The ride to Sacramento took 2 days. Reeves was a taciturn companion, offering little conversation beyond the necessary. Zelda and Cade rode close together, finding comfort in proximity even when words failed them. Both were tense, dreading what they might learn but needing to know the truth. Sacramento was bustling compared to Willits, full of noise and people and commerce. The jail was a solid stone building near the center of town, and Reeves led them inside with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. They were taken to a small room where 2 men sat shackled to a table. Both prisoners looked rough, faces marked by years of hard living and violence. The older one, a man with graying hair and a scar across his cheek, looked up as they entered. His eyes fixed on Cade and widened slightly. "Ranger Irons," he said. "I wondered if you would come." "I am not a ranger anymore," Cade said coldly, "and you are going to tell me everything you know about who ordered the attack on my wife." "Happy to," the man said. "In exchange for my testimony against Dutch McCarty and his gang, I have been promised a reduced sentence. 10 years instead of hanging. My associate here got the same deal." "I do not care about your deal," Cade said. "Just tell me what you know." The prisoner leaned back as much as his chains would allow. "Dutch McCarty has hated you for years, ever since you arrested his brother Tom and sent him to prison. Tom died there, killed in a fight with another inmate. Dutch swore he would make you pay, that he would take from you what you took from him." Zelda felt Cade go rigid beside her. "I was doing my job. Tom McCarty was a murderer and a thief." "Never said it was fair," the prisoner said with a shrug. "Just telling you what happened. Dutch tracked you for months, learning your routine, figuring out when you would be vulnerable. When he learned you had a wife, he saw his chance. He ordered us to hit your town when you were away, said to kill anyone who resisted. Your wife fought back, so she died." The room was silent except for the sound of Cade's harsh breathing. Zelda took his hand, squeezing tightly, offering what comfort she could. She could not imagine the pain he was feeling, learning that Elizabeth's death had been calculated revenge rather than random violence. "Where is McCarty now?" Cade finally asked, his voice deadly calm. "That is the thing," the prisoner said. He is still out there. We got caught, but Dutch and the core of his gang are still operating, and word on the street is that he knows you are in Willits now, knows you are getting married again." Zelda felt her blood run cold. "You are saying he is coming for us?" "I am saying he might," the prisoner said. "Dutch does not let go of grudges. If he thinks killing your new woman will hurt you the way you hurt him, he will do it without hesitation." "How many men does he have?" Cade asked. "Last I knew, about 8. All of them hardened killers, loyal to Dutch because he pays well and does not ask questions about their pasts." Reeves stepped forward. "We have warrants out for McCarty and his known associates. Every lawman in California is looking for them. But he is smart and careful. He could hide for months, even years, before making his move. Or he could show up in Willits tomorrow," Zelda said grimly. "We need to go back, warn the town, prepare defenses." "Agreed," Cade said. He looked at the prisoners. "Is there anything else you can tell us? Known hideouts, associates, anything that might help us find him first?" The prisoner thought for a moment. "Dutch has a sister in Redding. He sometimes holes up there when things get too hot. And he has a lieutenant, a man named Vince Blackwell, who is supposed to be one of the fastest guns in California. If Dutch comes for you, Blackwell will be with him." They spent another hour asking questions, extracting every piece of information the prisoners had. By the time they left the jail, both Zelda and Cade felt like they had been beaten. The ride back to Willits was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. "We should postpone the wedding," Cade finally said as they made camp for the night, "until this is resolved and McCarty is caught or dead." "Absolutely not," Zelda said firmly. "I am not letting some outlaw dictate when I can marry the man I love. We will be careful, we will prepare, but we are getting married as planned." "Zelda, he wants to kill you to hurt me. Marrying you just puts an even bigger target on your back." "The target is already there," Zelda pointed out. "McCarty knows we are together. A piece of paper saying we are married is not going to change that. But what it will do is make a statement that we will not live our lives in fear, that we will not let evil people steal our happiness." Cade looked at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "You are right. You are absolutely right. We face this head-on together and we do not let it stop us from living." "Exactly," Zelda said. She moved closer to him and he put his arm around her. "We are going to have a beautiful wedding, build our house, and grow old together. And if Dutch McCarty wants to try to stop that, he will discover what happens when you threaten a Texas Ranger and a California marshal who happen to be in love." When they returned to Willits, they called a town meeting and explained the situation. There was fear, understandably, but also determination. The people of Willits had already faced down one gang of outlaws. They were prepared to do it again if necessary. "We are going to increase patrols," Zelda told the assembled crowd. "Deputy Irons and I will alternate watches with our temporary deputies so that there is always at least one of us on duty. We are also asking every able-bodied person to be alert. If you see strangers in town, report it immediately. Do not approach them, do not try to be a hero, just let us know." "What about the wedding?" Mrs. Henderson called out. "Are you still getting married?" "Yes," Zelda said firmly, taking Cade's hand. "We will not let fear rule our lives. The wedding will proceed as planned, but we will have armed guards posted discreetly around the church and the reception. Anyone who wants to attend should know there is a potential risk, though we are doing everything we can to keep people safe." The town rallied around them. Men volunteered for extra patrols. Women organized a warning system using bells and signals. Children were instructed to stay close to home and report anything unusual. Willits transformed from a peaceful town into an armed camp, ready to defend itself. The weeks leading up to the wedding were tense. Every stranger was scrutinized. Every sound in the night investigated. But Dutch McCarty did not appear. Either he was biding his time, or the increased vigilance had convinced him that Willits was not an easy target. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, a beautiful early December morning with frost sparkling on the ground. Zelda dressed with help from Mrs. Henderson and several other women who had become her friends. The ivory dress fit perfectly, and as she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw not just a bride but a woman who had fought for her place in the world and won. The church was packed, every citizen of Willits wanting to witness the union of their marshal and deputy. Frank Hayes and Tommy Chen stood guard outside, rifles ready but expressions hopeful. Jacob Miller was inside, seated near the back with his wife, keeping watch over the congregation. Cade waited at the altar with Reverend Thompson, looking nervous and handsome in a new suit. When Zelda walked down the aisle, his face transformed with such joy that several women in the crowd began crying. She had no father to give her away, but she walked alone with her head high, proud of the journey that had brought her to this moment. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Thompson began, but Zelda barely heard the words. Her entire focus was on Cade, on the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. They exchanged vows, their voices steady and sure, promises to love and honor and stand together against whatever challenges came their way. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Cade kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache with happiness. The congregation erupted in applause, and they walked back down the aisle together as Mr. and Mrs. Irons. The reception was held at the town hall, with food and music and dancing. Zelda had never been much for social events, but tonight she let herself be swept up in the celebration. She danced with Cade, with Frank, with Tommy, with half the men in town who wanted to congratulate the bride. Cade was equally in demand, and they kept finding their way back to each other through the crowd. As the evening wore on and people began to head home, Zelda and Cade finally found themselves alone on the steps of the town hall. The night was clear, stars brilliant overhead, and Willits was peaceful around them. "We did it," Cade said, pulling her close. "We are married." "Yes, we are," Zelda agreed, resting her head against his chest. "Mrs. Zelda Irons. It has a nice sound to it." "I was thinking," Cade said carefully, "that you might want to keep Parker professionally. You have made a name for yourself as Marshal Parker, and people know and respect that name." Zelda looked up at him, touched by his consideration. "That is thoughtful, but no. I am proud to take your name, Cade. Marshal Zelda Irons will serve Willits just as well as Marshal Zelda Parker did." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other and savoring the peace. Then from the darkness beyond the town came a sound that made them both tense. Hoofbeats, multiple riders approaching fast. "Inside," Cade said sharply, pushing Zelda toward the door. But it was too late. 8 riders emerged from the shadows surrounding the town hall. In the center, a man with dark hair and cruel eyes sat his horse with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. "Cade Irons," Dutch McCarty said, his voice carrying through the night. "Congratulations on your wedding. Too bad you will not live long enough to enjoy it." Zelda and Cade moved as one, both drawing their weapons and taking cover behind the steps. Around them, the few remaining wedding guests screamed and scattered. Tommy Chen and Frank Hayes came running from their posts, rifles raised. "You have made a mistake coming here, McCarty," Cade called out. "Willits does not take kindly to threats." "I am not here for the town," McCarty said. "I am here for you, and for that pretty little wife of yours. You took my brother from me, Ranger. Now I am going to take everything from you." "Not happening," Zelda said. She fired twice, fast and accurate, dropping the rider closest to McCarty. The outlaw's horse reared, and suddenly the night exploded with gunfire. What followed was chaos. McCarty's gang spread out, using the darkness and their mobility to create confusion. But they had underestimated Willits and its defenders. People who had been at the wedding emerged from their homes with weapons, firing from windows and doorways. The outlaws found themselves in a crossfire similar to what Callahan had faced months before. Zelda and Cade worked together seamlessly, covering each other as they moved to better positions. She saw Cade take down 2 riders with precise shots, saw Frank Hayes drop another. Tommy Chen was bleeding from a graze wound but still fighting. The battle was fierce but brief, the outlaws realizing quickly that they were outmatched. McCarty himself fought with desperate fury, firing wildly as his men fell around him. His horse was shot out from under him, and he rolled free, coming up with both guns blazing. Zelda felt a bullet tug at her dress, close enough to feel the heat. She returned fire, her shot taking McCarty in the shoulder and spinning him around. Cade was there in an instant, his gun trained on the outlaw leader. "It is over, Dutch. Your men are dead or dying. Surrender now, and you might live to stand trial." McCarty looked around at the carnage, at his gang scattered in the street. Vince Blackwell, the supposedly deadly gunman, lay dead beside his horse. The others were in various states of injury or death. Willits had won again, defending itself against those who sought to do harm. "You cost me everything," McCarty said, blood streaming from his shoulder. "My brother, my gang, my freedom. I wanted you to know that same pain." "I did know that pain," Cade said quietly. "You saw to that when you had my first wife killed. But you know what I learned? That pain does not have to be the end. That there is still good in this world, still love and hope and people worth fighting for. You could have learned that too. Instead, you chose revenge. And now you have nothing." McCarty slumped, the fight going out of him. Tommy Chen came forward with shackles, securing the outlaw while Frank checked the other gang members. 3 were dead, 4 wounded badly enough that they would not be causing trouble. It was finished. Zelda holstered her gun and turned to Cade, needing to touch him to confirm he was unhurt. He pulled her close, and she felt his heart racing against hers. "Some wedding day," she said, her voice shaking with delayed reaction. "Never dull with you," Cade managed, his attempt at humor undermined by the tremor in his voice. "Are you hurt?" "Just my dress," Zelda said. "Mrs. Henderson is going to kill me for getting it shot." Cade laughed, the sound edging toward hysteria, and pulled her tighter. Around them, the people of Willits were emerging to help with the wounded and celebrate another victory. Their wedding had turned into a battle, but they had survived. They had won. Doc Morrison arrived to tend the wounded, both townsfolk and outlaws. Only 2 people from Willits had been hurt, Tommy and a man named Roberts who had taken a bullet in the leg. Both would recover. Of McCarty's gang, only the leader and 1 other man survived to face trial. Marshal Reeves arrived 3 days later, having received word of the fight. He took custody of McCarty and his surviving associate, shaking his head in amazement at what Willits had accomplished. "You folks are either the bravest or the craziest people I have ever met," he said. "Most towns would have folded under this kind of pressure. You just keep fighting." "We have good leadership," Frank Hayes said, nodding toward Zelda and Cade. "They taught us that standing up to bullies is always the right choice, even when it is dangerous." After Reeves left with his prisoners, life slowly returned to normal. The town council awarded Zelda and Cade a week off for their delayed honeymoon, and they spent it in the partially completed house on the hill, camping under the stars and planning their future. "When we have children," Cade said one night as they lay wrapped in blankets watching the sky, "I want to teach them what you taught this town. That courage is not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. That standing up for what is right matters more than being safe. When we have children, Zelda echoed, liking the sound of it. I want 3 at least, a house full of noise and laughter. I can do 3, Cade agreed. As long as you are the one helping me raise them, I have a feeling any child of yours is going to be a handful. Takes one to know one, Zelda teased. They were married in December of 1878. By spring of 1879, their house was complete, a beautiful structure with a wide porch and large windows that let in the California sun. Zelda continued serving as marshal, with Cade as her deputy, until August when she realized she was pregnant with their first child. I can still work, she insisted, even as Cade fussed over her. Women have been having babies and working for thousands of years. Not women who might get shot at, Cade countered. Let Frank take over as marshal for a while. You can consult, offer advice, but I want you and our baby safe. Zelda chafed at the restriction but recognized the wisdom in it. She reluctantly agreed to step back from active duty, though she continued to review reports and offer strategic advice from their home. Their son was born in April of 1880, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. They named him Benjamin, after Zelda's father. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, who they named Elizabeth after Cade's first wife. It felt right to honor her memory, to acknowledge that she had been part of Cade's journey to Zelda. Another son followed 3 years after that, whom they named Samuel for no reason except that they both liked the name. Zelda never returned to active duty as marshal. Instead, she trained the next generation of law enforcement, teaching young deputies the skills her father had taught her. She also wrote a book about law enforcement in the Wild West, focusing on strategies for small towns defending themselves against larger threats. It was published in 1888 and became required reading in police academies across California. Cade remained deputy marshal until 1890, when he and Zelda both officially retired. They were in their 40s then, ready to focus fully on their family and the community they had helped build. Willits had grown and prospered, becoming known throughout California as the town that refused to be bullied, the place where a woman proved that badges were not just for men. Their children grew up hearing stories of their parents' adventures, of facing down outlaws and defending their home. Benjamin followed his parents into law enforcement, becoming a sheriff in Sacramento. Elizabeth became a lawyer, one of the first women admitted to the California bar. Samuel chose a different path, becoming a teacher and writer, documenting the history of the Old West. Zelda and Cade grew old together in the house on the hill overlooking Willits. They spent their days gardening, reading, and entertaining a steady stream of grandchildren. On warm evenings, they would sit on the porch watching the sunset, remembering that first day when Zelda had walked into the marshal's office demanding a badge. "You regret it?" Cade asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "Giving up being marshal to have a family?" Zelda thought about the question seriously before answering. "No," she finally said. "Being marshal was important, proving that women could do the job was important. But this life we built together, our children and grandchildren, the community we helped shape. This is what I was really meant for, not just the badge, but everything that came after." "I am glad," Cade said, taking her hand, "because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You saved me, Zelda, in more ways than you know. You gave me purpose again, gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again. You gave me everything." "You gave me the same," Zelda said softly. "The courage to demand that badge, to stand up to men who thought I could not do the job. But more than that, you gave me partnership, respect, and a love I never thought I would find. We saved each other, Cade." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, Willits glowed with lamplight as people finished their day's work and settled in for the evening. It was peaceful, prosperous, a far cry from the frightened town it had been nearly 40 years ago. "Tell me the story again," came a small voice from the doorway. Their youngest grandson, Michael, stood there in his nightshirt, eyes wide with interest. "Tell me about the day Grandma became marshal." Zelda laughed and patted her lap. At 8, Michael was almost too big to sit there, but he climbed up anyway, settling against her with the trust of a child who had never known anything but love and safety. "Well," she began, "it was the summer of 1878, and the town of Willits had a problem. A big problem named Buck Callahan." As Zelda told the story, with Cade interjecting details and corrections, Michael listened with rapt attention. This was his heritage, his history, the story of how his grandparents had changed not just their own lives but an entire community. When she finished, he looked up at her with admiration clear in his young face. "When I grow up," he declared, "I want to be just like you, Grandma, brave and strong and not afraid of anything." "Then let me tell you a secret," Zelda said, hugging him close. "I was afraid. I was terrified that day I walked into the marshal's office. But I did it anyway, because sometimes being brave means doing what is right even when you are scared. And having someone stand beside you makes all the difference," Cade added, smiling at his wife. "Your grandmother taught this town and me that courage is contagious. When one person stands up, others find the strength to stand with them." Michael's mother, Elizabeth, appeared to collect him for bed. As she led the sleepy boy away, she paused to kiss both her parents on the cheek. "Thank you," she said, "for everything you have given us. The stories, the example, the foundation to build our own lives on." After she left, Cade turned to Zelda. "Do you think they understand, really understand what those days were like?" "Maybe not entirely," Zelda admitted. "The West is changing, becoming civilized, but they understand the important part. That standing up for what is right matters. That love and courage can overcome fear and violence. That is enough." They sat together until the stars came out, two old lovers who had faced down death and danger to build a life worth living. When Cade finally helped Zelda to her feet and they walked inside together, they moved with the careful synchronization of people who had been partners for decades. In bed, with Cade's arms around her and the sounds of their family settling down for the night around them, Zelda thought about that girl who had demanded a badge so long ago. She had wanted to prove that women could wear a star, could serve as effectively as any man. She had done that before sundown on her first day, facing down Buck Callahan with nothing but courage and a fast draw. But what she had gained was so much more than vindication. She had found purpose, community, and a love that had sustained her through decades. She had raised children who carried forward her values, had helped build a town that stood as an example of what ordinary people could accomplish when they refused to be victims. The town had said no woman could wear a badge. She had proven every cowboy wrong, and in doing so had found everything she had never known she was looking for. "I love you," she whispered to Cade in the darkness. "I love you too," he murmured back, already half asleep. "Always have, always will." Zelda closed her eyes, safe and content, surrounded by the life they had built together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, as every day did, but they would face them together, as they always had, two hearts beating as one. The story that had begun with a young woman demanding justice had become a legacy of courage, love, and family that would echo through generations. And somewhere in the California night, the town of Willits slept peacefully, protected not by fear or force, but by the memory of two people who had shown them that standing together was the strongest defense of all. Years passed as they do, and both Zelda and Cade eventually left the world they had worked so hard to make better. But their story lived on, told and retold in Willits and beyond. The house on the hill became a landmark, eventually converted into a museum dedicated to early law enforcement in California. Zelda's badge was displayed there, alongside Cade's, a testament to partnership and courage. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren spread across the West, carrying with them the lessons learned from two people who had refused to back down in the face of evil. Some became lawmen and women themselves. Others chose different paths, but all of them understood the fundamental truth that Zelda and Cade had lived by. That one person, standing up for what is right, can change the world. The tale of the woman who wore a badge when the town said no woman could, who proved every cowboy wrong before sundown, became legend. But more than that, it became a promise, passed down through generations, that courage and love can overcome any obstacle, that standing together makes us stronger than we ever could be alone, and that sometimes the most unexpected partnerships create the most beautiful legacies. And if you listen carefully on a warm California evening, standing on that hill overlooking Willits where a house once stood, you might hear the echo of laughter, the murmur of voices telling old stories, the sound of two people who loved each other and their community enough to fight for both. It is the sound of a life well lived, a love well earned, and a legacy that will never fade. The end of their story was really just the beginning of countless others, ripples spreading out from that one moment when a young woman walked into a marshal's office and demanded to be taken seriously. She had wanted to prove a point, to honor her father's memory, to bring justice to a frightened town. She had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams, and in the process, had found a partner who saw her not as a woman trying to do a man's job, but simply as someone extraordinary worth standing beside. That is the real story of Zelda Parker, who became Zelda Irons, Marshal of Willits, California, and the cowboy who helped her change the West.